I think the fear is completely rational. I just think it's aimed at the wrong target. The real risk isn't that AI comes in and takes your job. It's that the organization uses AI only to cut costs rather than create new value. And that's a leadership choice. That's not a technology inevitability.
Welcome back to the Balancing Act podcast. I'm Andy Tempe. On the Balancing Act, we talk to business leaders and industry experts to explore the balancing acts we play in our professional lives and learn about the events that put rocket boosters behind their career success. Today, we have Dave Wright joining us. Dave is the Chief Innovation Officer at ServiceNow, where he explores how AI and emerging technologies are reshaping business and work. With nearly 30 years in the IT industry and more than a decade at ServiceNow, where he's also served as the Chief Strategy Officer, Dave brings a rare practitioner's view of what it actually takes to embed intelligence into the core of an organization rather than just bolting it onto legacy systems. And we're going to talk a lot about that. So if you're the leader who's still trying to implement RPA at your business, we're going to chat about that. Dave, I'm talking to his colleague Brian next week. He's the co-author with his ServiceNow colleague Brian Solis of the recently released Infinite, How Visionary Leaders Transform Today's Businesses into AI-Forward Companies. So, deep breath. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Like the intro. Thanks for having me on, Andy. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, yeah, you guys are have written a really awesome book, and there's a lot there. So the introduction had to be a little bit longer. Give us the elevator pitch version of your story, Dave.
From the story of ServiceNow or the story of the book?
The story of you, Dave Wright.
Okay.
Where did you come from?
So I kind of left school relatively early. Didn't do the college route, which I kind of regret in retrospect. But it was a good education for me doing the whole University of Life thing. I ended up very early on in my career at London Electricity as a mainframe operator. So I was a mainframe guy in the 80s, started off as an operator, ended up as a sysprog on mainframes, then went through a period of working for mainframe software companies. So for anyone who's really old, who's listening to this, all the Candle products, the Megamon products, the AF operator products, all the way through monitoring. And then in the mid-90s, I ended up at Peregrine Systems. And Peregrine Systems, great group of people there, but one of the guys there was the Chief Technology Officer, Fred Luddy. And when Peregrine Systems folded, Fred went off and started ServiceNow. I went off to VMware. I was head of technical services for VMware for EMEA for 7 years. Fred started ServiceNow, obviously. And then 2011, I got into a conversation about joining ServiceNow. Initially, I didn't want to join ServiceNow because it was I saw it as being purely focused on ITSM, and I didn't want to do ITSM again. But then Fred explained the whole vision, and when I understood what the vision was, I left VMware in 2011 and joined ServiceNow to head up solution consulting under Frank Slootman. Then I became the Chief Strategy Officer under Frank, and then the Chief Innovation Officer under John Donahoe when he arrived, and did the same job for Bill when he arrived.
That's awesome. So early in your career, I just have to ask, did you program with cards? Because I remember distinctly.
Yeah, they were still doing card readers for JCL, for job control language, and they were still using punch cards. They were still using discs that you could pick up and move around. So it's the old days.
I have that story of walking across campus and dropping my box of cards I was supposed to upload. Everybody thinks that those are just quaint old stories, but they were absolutely true.
It's a reality.
Yeah, for sure. Dave, if you had to pick one event in your life that was just a real accelerant for you, what would that be?
One event. I think it was probably when I started at VMware, because that was the first time I'd worked with new technology that had no competition. So you've got to remember, I joined VMware in 2004, I think. So no one was doing virtualization at that point. No one. This was 3 years before, or 4 years before people even mentioned cloud computing, and I'm moving into an area where I had no expertise, I had no history, and being able to end up being one of the technical spokespeople for that was something that then freed me up to think, well, actually, I'm not constrained by only being able to work on my experience. I can I can take something I haven't got experience of and actually educate myself to get to the point of credibility. And that kind of freed up my thinking a little bit. In the past, I always used to think you had to be the expert, you had to have the degree, you had to have worked in it for 20 years. But I realize now, even when I've worked in an industry for a long time, I can meet someone who's relatively new to the industry, and I suddenly realize, yes, this is a different way of looking at things. And I think if you extrapolate that and talk about that in the world of AI, it's been interesting recently to see like the CEOs of Coca-Cola, the CEO of Walmart saying, "Hey, I've started this AI journey and took the company as far as I want to take it, but for this next step, it needs someone who's got more of that mindset." So I think the whole working industry is going through a little bit of a revolution now.
Yeah. Well, Dave, tell us about ServiceNow. I want to get into your role at ServiceNow, but just give us the 20-second, what is ServiceNow for our listeners who may not have heard of it, and then talk about your role as Chief Innovation Officer.
Okay. So ServiceNow started off as a company that was designed to manage any forms-based workflow across the enterprise. So anything where you're taking a piece of information and passing it around an organization to get completed. We started off focusing on the world of IT, so how people do IT changes, IT requests, IT fixes. But then that started to expand out in how we dealt with things like employee requests that might go through a human resources system, or how we started off with how we looked at customer requests that might go through a CRM system. And as it developed, now people use it to manage any type of service. But the interesting thing for us was we realized we could go cross-platform. So if you imagine onboarding an employee, yes, that's a HR task, but finance has to do stuff, facilities have to do stuff, IT has to do stuff. We could manage that workflow. And when we started to understand the power of being able to manage those workflows, and then artificial intelligence came along, we started our AI journey in like 2015, 2016. That capability to be able to take those workflows and apply AI to them and be able to streamline them and analyze them, and in some cases completely automate them, is kind of where the company's got to now. So so my role, as you look at the company as Chief Innovation Officer, is a bad title, to be honest, because people think, oh, so all the innovation sits with you. And if you ever work for a company where one guy does all the innovation, find a new
Yeah.
company. Yeah, and well, maybe unless you're at Apple, but anywhere else, find a new company. So what I do is I look at new technologies that are on the horizon, try and understand what the implications will be to ServiceNow, and and try and influence in some way. Perhaps it's influencing someone on part of the product side. Perhaps it's influencing someone looking at mergers and acquisitions, or influencing someone on the partner side. But it's an influence role. I do run a whole division of the company called ServiceNow Futures, which looks at what the trends are and what the signals are we're seeing in the industry. They produce foresight papers. They produce kind of leading edge papers around what the future could be for how people work, what the future could be for CRM, the application of AI, the application of quantum compute. So it really is an interesting job from a scope perspective. I get to look at all these different new cool technologies. And like you said, next week you'll get to speak to Brian, and he'll give you some of the view of what we do from a futurist perspective.
Yeah, so we're later in the show, we're going to talk about real technical transformation versus incremental improvement, and so thank you for explaining your job and your role. We're going to take a really short commercial break, and we're going to come back and get into some of the specifics. Want to understand money, markets, and the economy to make better financial decisions? I'm Andy Tempe. Join me every Saturday morning for Money Lessons with Andrew Tempe on YouTube or your favorite podcast streaming service. And we're back with Dave Wright talking about what it really takes to build a company around AI rather than just bolting it on. Dave, you've spent a career helping enterprises re-engineer how work gets done, first through automation. We talked about RPA, robotic process automation, a little bit beforehand. And now with artificial intelligence. You've seen where this goes right and where it stalls. So for the leader who's been handed AI mandate and a stack of new tools, where do these transformations break down? And more specifically, what separates the companies that get real change from the ones that, frankly, just get busier?
So I split it in, or we split it in the book into two mindsets, and we call it mode 1 and mode 2. Mode 1 is iterative, which you just described, where it's people, hey, let's do more of it, let's do it faster. Mode 2 is innovative, where it's, hey, let's do something that we couldn't do before, or let's use AI to create space for us to do something we couldn't do more from a business perspective. So it's the difference between, I'll see people in an iterative mindset where they'll say, hey, we've got all these customer service tickets coming in and we're going to use AI to summarize how we fix them and maybe create a knowledge article off the back of that. That's interesting. It's a valid use of AI, but you could also do that with people. I mean, you could just outsource the summarization and call it a day. The more interesting thing would be to say, well, let's not just summarize what we did. Let's also look at the other 8,000 times that we did it and work out what we could have done to make it faster, what we could have done to automate it. So it's using AI to do something that you couldn't necessarily do before. But the people who are really getting the value from this are the people who are realizing that what they need to do is they need to kind of engineer their business a bit around the technology. What I think the mistake is people make is they look at AI and they say, this is a new tool. How can we apply this tool to our existing business? And the thing is, you need to think about much more of a fundamental redesign. So we've been organizing around functions for years and years, but AI forces you to organize around flows. It's not a technology change, it's a redesign of how you think about the company. So most workflows that most companies use are designed on, well, they're designed around two things. They're designed around uniformity, so getting things to happen the same every time, but they're designed around a scarcity of resource. So the scarcity of resource in most companies is people. So how do we optimize something to get people to do things in the most effective way? But now when you introduce AI to it, and specifically agentic AI, and you have the ability to do tasks or create complete digital workers, the question then is, what do those workflows look like if they were engineered for abundance as opposed to being engineered for scarcity? And there's a McKinsey report, part of Carbon Black Group, where they look at the 25 different things that you can use from an AI perspective to change EBIT data. So how you can actually improve the earnings that you get. And the most powerful one out of the 25 things you can change is to re-engineer your workflows to be AI-based workflows. But at the moment, I see a lot of people just using it to automate what they've already got in the past. So they're automating the past as opposed to inventing the future.
Yeah, so all sorts of things come into my mind as you're talking about that, and the primary one is change management. How are you seeing the organizations that quote unquote get it right approach change management with their people? Because this is all really scary for everybody. People think their jobs are going to get disrupted, and so to get folks to say yes and to really come on board to that, organizational re-engineering versus being the blocker to push back.
Right.
How are you seeing that be effective? Who's getting it right?
So first of all, I think the fear is completely rational. I just think it's aimed at the wrong target. At the moment, the real risk isn't that AI comes in and takes your job. It's that the organization uses AI only to cut costs rather than create new value. And that's a leadership choice. That's not a technology inevitability.
Yeah.
So you think of all the technologies that we've had that have produced the same fear, but the jobs have actually been replaced by jobs that people didn't imagine yet. The leaders who navigate that well are the ones who pretend that the fear isn't real. They're the ones who answer with a genuine plan for what comes next. So I think the first thing that the people that get it right go in with a very transparent approach to how they're going to do things. This is why we're deploying AI. This is what we want to achieve with it. But the most important thing, and this is another interesting thing we've seen happen in some industries. We saw it happen in Moderna. We saw it happen in Atlassian, where they combined the technology leadership and the HR leadership together. So they had one person that was looking at everything from a technology and a human perspective.
Mm.
And what that enables you to do, and I'm not saying every company should necessarily do that, but what it allows you to do is think about what your workforce looks like as a hybrid workforce. And the way you get this to work, with everyone is you have to create a framework of trust. So you have to make sure that people trust that the company is using AI to be able to allow them to do things that perhaps they couldn't do before, or more interesting things. But you also have to develop a level of trust where your employees can say, hey, this piece of AI that we've employed here, this like sucks. This doesn't provide any extra value. And what I find in a lot of companies is AI's created this emperor's new clothes scenario where no one wants to question it, and everyone's like, oh, we deployed AI, it's all great, even though at a ground force level people will be saying, well, this doesn't work, or this is not what we should be doing. And it's been really interesting. My oldest daughter started an internship, and I was saying to her, so now you're in the world of work, what do you take away from it the most, especially because I was talking to her in terms of AI. And she said she was shocked at how people overuse AI, how people use AI for everything, even in scenarios where AI perhaps wasn't the best choice. And I think this is why you see this whole token maxing concept now, where people are using it for things that they could have perhaps done just as easily as they did before. So yeah, for me, when you talk about what's successful when you do this, it's transparency, it's allaying that fear, it's being honest, and it's developing that framework of trust for people to operate in as well.
Well, I think that's a great segue into our mentorship moment of the show, where I put a hypothetical. I'm going to put a hypothetical vice president of a company in front of you that's been handed an AI strategy by the CEO or the board. They got a budget and they've got a deadline. 6 months in, they've got all these pilots, so much activity, but really nothing that adds up to the transformation they're expected to. They're overwhelmed. They're doubting themselves. How do you coach this individual?
So I think that's one of the first problems you highlighted then in the question is pilots all over the place. Everyone started different pilots, everyone doing their own thing. The easiest way to get value out of this is start off, and I know it sounds weird to talk about workflows when we're talking about AI, but start off with one workflow. If you look at what this VP is being tasked with, it's going to be to automate some kind of business process. And what people do is they do all these pilots to automate individual parts of the process. But then you end up with these seams where there's handoffs between departments, and those seams are where AI efficiency goes to die. It's hey, we've done this, and now we've got here, and now we're waiting for a human, or a human doesn't know that SLAs, perhaps also because now we're able to feed them work. We're very used as a working society, we're very used to going into work in the morning and generating a load of things that need to be done during the day, as opposed to allowing AI to do some of that work and then have output presented when you arrive in the morning. But if you can take one workflow, the workflow has to be cross business. It has to be looking at something that flows across everything in your business unit that you're trying to automate. And it also has to be something of value. So if you go and use AI to automate a process that's not really significant to the company, then people aren't going to see the value for it. If you choose something that's really meaty, if you choose like, hey, we're going to use AI to automate onboarding, or we're going to use AI to automate supply chain optimization, and you choose a specific workflow in those areas, as you go through the workflow, that allows you to start questioning, are we doing things in the right way? But it allows you to learn so much about the deployments of AI across a business, as opposed to just trying to deploy it in the silos. Because in the silos, you'll learn nothing. In the silos, you'll just learn how to optimize what happens in that area. You won't learn how to optimize for your business. So that would be my tip for that VP, would be stop all small pilots, choose a big transformative workflow that you want to look at that means something to the business, and look at it and understand where you'd apply AI to it. And just as importantly, look at it as where you wouldn't apply AI to it.
Yeah. And in the back of my continuous improvement training is just screaming in the back of my head that process documentation, which is sometimes handled in Kaizen style events, but that becomes even more important in this current environment than it was before, to truly understand your workflows. I loved. We should have T-shirts printed up that say the seams between workflows is where AI goes to die.
I mean, it's so true. It's like if you want a free audit of your workflows, then try and automate them with AI, because what happens with a traditional workflow is you get through the workflow, and then like Jennifer always knows that at this point what you have to do is take this from this system and put it in here, and then it works. AI doesn't know that, so AI will just get to a point and stop. And when you get these points where AI just stops, it's not AI failing, it's the workflow failing. It's someone doing something that's undocumented, it's someone doing something that's based on tribal knowledge. So it's a great way to audit how effective your workflows are.
Yeah, and you very quickly see who is who on the team is in job protection mode, ensuring that entropy continues to exist in the organization, because their job depends on that entropy continuing to exist. Dave, let's talk about stewardship. I define stewardship is defined as holding something of value in for future generation, for future employee, and thinking about the company as an infinite long-term entity, really. So becoming AI forward means rethinking the plumbing, the team structures, shape of the workflows as you've described. How does that run into this concept of stewardship, the urgency to adapt or fall behind in the AI race? How do I continue to be a steward of the business and adopt artificial intelligence?
So I think, if you think of stewardship as you say, looking after a business to pass down to other generations, a lot of this is what the whole concept of Infinite was about. It's how do you make sure you're using AI in the right way to be able to increase the longevity of your company. And one of the interesting analogies I always use is, and you mentioned before when we started, you talked about cars in the background. I'm very much a car guy, but you look at the automotive industry, and what happened with the automotive industry. You go back to like the 50s and 60s in America. The automotive industry was huge, and it was creating these incredibly visionary cars. It was designing things that you weren't seeing anywhere else in the world. And then eventually what happened was you started to see the concept of automation coming into play, where it's like, no, now we've got to be more cost effective. We've got to be able to produce cars cheaper. And one of the things of producing cars cheaper was they started to take on a similar appearance. You have to have things that were easier to manufacture. And then it became about, so originally that was, how do we compete with an Asian market that's producing a cheaper product that's high quality? Then it became, how do we produce a product that's high quality, such as some of the German manufacturers are producing? But what it did was it killed a lot of the innovation for quite a while, where the industry itself suffered from, hey, we're doing things as cheaply and effectively as possible, but we haven't got that innovation that was driving us forward and moving us forward that we have in the past. And that is what I think the risk is from a stewardship perspective for companies. You shouldn't be looking at how you just use AI to reduce bottom line costs. You should be looking at it as, how do I produce something that drives top line revenue? Because once you get into that mindset of, let's do something different, let's do something we couldn't do before, let's change the reputation of the company by improving employee sat to a ridiculous level, or driving customer satisfaction somewhere where it's not been before. That's where you start to future-proof the company. You're not just making technical improvements, you're making reputational improvements. And for me, that's what this all comes down to. How do I build a company that people want to work for? How do I build a company that people want to buy from, that people want to partner with, that people want to be suppliers of? It's all about how you create that ultimate experience. And that's one of the things we haven't touched on yet in the call. For me, I think the one thing that drives acceptance of this, that drives success in this, is to be able to create an experience that was better than it was before. That should be something that's always front and center for everyone doing this type of rollout.
Yeah. Well, if I could start a wave with our listeners, and that's just a wonderful bookend to our conversation. Thank you so much, Dave. Let's have a little fun as we close things out. I've got a couple of lightning round questions for you.
Okay.
All right. Dave Wright, you've just won a $100 million lotto jackpot, but there's a stipulation that half of your net winnings go to one philanthropic organization or a general cause. Who do you pick?
I would pick one of the cancer charities.
Second, I give you access to a little bitty time machine, and you can send a message to an earlier version of Dave Wright. What's the message, and what previous version do you send it to?
I send it back to Dave Wright in 2016, and the message is, buy NVIDIA.
Okay, thank you for that. Now to something a bit more serious. We are all works in progress. We've been really talking today about human development. That's really at the core of building the infinite company, is ensuring that your people are set up for success, that you as a human are set up for success. So we're all works in progress. What are you focused on right now in your personal journey of growth?
So for me now, it's moving a lot more onto how do I, as I get older in life, it's much more how do I share my knowledge. So I think I spent many decades trying to accumulate knowledge. And one of the great things about meeting Brian, who you're going to introduce next week, was Brian's written 9 books before we wrote this book. And I was having a conversation when we were talking about all the different things we were seeing with customers. And I said, we should write a book about this. And normally that's where that conversation stops. But Brian was a person who could say, yeah, you're right, we should. So let's start it and do it now. So that was a big growth experience for me, to be able to to spend a year, well, still doing my day job, but spend a year at the weekends researching things and understanding the process that went into writing, and then understanding the process that comes into educating people to consume that. And although I've spent a long time doing keynotes in the past, a lot of my keynotes have been geared towards products for different companies. Now I'm enjoying a lot more time delivering keynotes where it's explaining to people how they can use this technology and how they can get more from it. So it becomes much less of a sales pitch and much more of an optimization pitch.
That's wonderful. Dave, thank you so much. Where can folks learn more about the book?
So you can go to the website infinitecompany.ai and find everything about me and Brian and everything about the book. If you follow me, I think you'll find me as Dave Wright 2 on LinkedIn. But I publish articles quite often. You can see all the latest thinking, and you can see some of the stuff that doesn't just relate to this book, but also relates to some of the thinking we're doing around futures.
Dave, it's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you and certainly sharing your knowledge with our listeners today. So thank you so much.
No, I appreciate you inviting me on, Andy. It's been great. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, my name is Andy Temte, and this is the Balancing Act Podcast. You can find the show on all the major streaming services as well as out on YouTube. Please like, subscribe, rate, and most importantly, share this public educational good with your friends, your family, your colleagues, and maybe the neighbor down the street. The show is produced by Nicholas Temte, and we'll see you next time on the Balancing Act.